My name is Natalie, I'm 19, and until a few months ago, I genuinely believed my parents loved me and my brother the same. I wasn't a troublemaker growing up. I followed the rules, kept my head down, worked hard in school, and made sure not to disappoint anyone. If anything, I was the easy one. My brother Aaron, on the other hand, was, well, charming, but reckless. He had this big personality, always chasing some wild idea, always landing in chaos. Still, I thought we were a family. Messy, maybe, but whole. That illusion completely shattered the summer before college. Getting into Northwestern had been my dream for years. I worked every spare minute in high school to get there late nights, advanced courses, volunteering, part-time jobs, you name it. When the acceptance letter finally arrived, it felt like everything had been worth it. I got in, but it wasn't a full ride. Tuition was covered, yes, but there were still books, housing, meal plans, and day-to-day costs to figure out. I wasn't worried, though. My grandparents had set up a college fund for me the day I was born. My parents had always told me it was safe, that I'd be able to use it when the time came. I'll never forget the moment that changed. I was sitting at our kitchen table, that big white envelope in front of me, practically glowing with promise. I looked up at my parents, expecting them to be proud, excited, but my mom avoided my eyes. My dad let out this long sigh, like I had just asked him to move a mountain. Then he said it. The fund was gone. We lost everything in the market, he said, his voice heavy, like I was supposed to feel sorry for them. We didn't want to stress you out during finals, my mom added, wearing this fake soft expression that made my skin crawl. I just sat there, silent. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. I asked them what happened, where the money went, why they hadn't told me sooner. But all I got were half answers. The same phrases over and over. We'll figure something out. There are loans. Maybe community college for now. It felt like I had stepped into some twisted parallel universe where nothing I had worked for mattered. That night, I cried harder than I'd ever cried before. Everything I had planned gone in an instant, torn apart by something I didn't cause and couldn't fix. But even in the middle of that heartbreak, something didn't sit right. The next morning, I started applying for every scholarship I could find. I took on more hours at the bookstore where I worked. I listed old clothes online to sell. I wasn't going to just give up, but deep down, I was uneasy. My parents didn't seem as stressed as I was. They weren't cutting back. My dad was. Still golfing on Sundays like usual. My mom was still doing spa days and brunches, and Aaron had just dropped out of college altogether. He was suddenly launching a business. That's when things started to unravel. One night, I came downstairs for water. It was late, probably after midnight. I heard voices in the backyard, my parents, and Aaron. I stood behind the sliding door, just out of view, and listened. They were laughing. I heard my mom say, "That startup better take off, Aaron. We drained Natalie's college fund for this. She bounced back, she always does." And then my dad added, "It was the only way to get you started, son. Just make sure it works. We can't exactly ask her for it back." That moment it broke something in me. They hadn't lost the money. They hadn't made a bad investment. They took it, gave it to Aaron, handed over my future like it was nothing more than a casual gift. I didn't make a sound. I didn't confront them. I walked back upstairs, locked my door, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. And right there, something shifted inside me. Every ounce of trust, every bit of loyalty I had for them had vanished. They thought I was going to accept it, smile through the betrayal, maybe cry a little, and then get over it. But I had other plans, you see. My grandfather, my mom's dad, wasn't exactly the trusting type, especially not when it came to money. Years ago, during one of our quiet Saturday chess games, he told me he had set up a second account, a custodial investment account in my name, one that would transfer to my control when I turned 18. And he made me promise not to tell anyone, not even my parents. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever need it. But that night, I opened the app, moved every cent into a new high-yield savings account at a separate bank, and set alerts for any attempted access. The next morning, I visited the bank and added a verbal passcode to the account. From then on, I smiled. I played the role. I acted like I was still struggling. I kept working, applying for aid, pretending like I was looking into cheaper options. My mom kept suggesting online classes and community college like it was some generous compromise. And I just nodded like a good daughter. But behind the scenes, I was getting everything in order. Aaron's startup was under his name, but the money had come from a shared joint accountant account that had originally been set up for me. My parents were technically co-owners, but now that I was an adult, I had the legal right to audit and freeze the account. So I did, quietly, thoroughly. It only took a few days for the freeze to go through, and when it did, my dad came bursting into my room, face red with anger, waving papers in his hand. "What did you do?" he shouted. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I moved the money Grandpa gave me, the one you didn't know about. Try to touch it again, and I'll report you. To the bank, and to Grandpa." He went pale, completely speechless. And that was the moment I knew I had the power now. Not out of revenge, out of necessity. Because clearly, no one was looking out for me except me. But this was only the beginning. I had no idea how deep the betrayal would go, or how far I'd have to go to take my future back. After I froze the joint account and locked down the money my grandfather gave me, I knew I had the upper hand. But I also knew better than to show my cards too soon, so I stayed quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I didn't try to expose them or demand justice. Not yet. Instead, I let them believe they had one. I kept pretending I was struggling. I still picked up every extra shift I could at the bookstore, still applied for scholarships like my life depended on it. I even entertained my mom's constant suggestions about affordable online classes and living at home for the first semester. I smiled through every conversation, even though I wanted to scream. Every time she brought it up, it felt like salt in a wound they had created, but deep down, I was planning. Every moment I stayed silent gave me more time to prepare. They had no idea that the college fund wasn't their only mistake. They thought they had control because they had once signed my name on an account I never got to touch. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask was that I had legal rights now. I was 19, legally an adult. And with that came power they couldn't take from me. While I played the broke daughter at home, I was doing my research. I combed through every detail of Aaron's so-called startup. The business license, the registration address, the funding history. It didn't take long to find a paper trail leading back to the joint account. That was the nail in the coffin. Money wasn't just missing. It had been intentionally redirected to a private business, registered under my brother's name, with no formal consent from me, the primary beneficiary. And here's where it got interesting. That account my parents had co-managed for me. Now that I was legally an adult, I could initiate an audit. I could pull records. I could request a full investigation into every withdrawal and transaction. So that's exactly what I did. No warning, no heads up, just paperwork quietly filed and submitted. Within a week, their access was cut off. The account was frozen, and every transaction was flagged for review. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. My dad was the first to explode. One evening, he barged into my room like a storm, red in the face, holding a stack of bank documents like I'd just committed a crime. "What did you do?" he demanded. I didn't even blink. "I moved my money," I said. "The money, Grandpa. Left me, you know, the one you never knew existed." His expression went from furious to stunned in seconds. For the first time, I think he realized he wasn't in control anymore. "You're making a mistake," he said, but I didn't flinch. "Try touching anything with my name on it again," I told him, "and I'll report everything. To the bank, and to Grandpa." That shut him up, but that wasn't the end. Not even close. I knew the damage they'd done wasn't just financial. It was personal. It was betrayal. Plain and simple. And I wasn't going to let them walk away from it like nothing happened. The very next day, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of Aaron's posts bragging about his STARTUP, photos of champagne toasts, public comments from my mom calling him a visionary. All of it was carefully curated proof of how they had spent my future like it was disposable income. I put it all into a folder and titled it, "For Grandpa," but I didn't send it. Not yet. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done, and oh, they did. My mom started acting strange, overly cheerful, offering to help me look for used textbooks, bringing home brochures for local community colleges. It was all fake, of course. Just a performance. Like she could pretend our family hadn't just imploded behind closed doors. And Aaron, he stayed, out of my way, probably too busy playing entrepreneur to notice the ground beneath him was starting to crack. A few days later, I overheard my parents arguing in the hallway. "She's being difficult," my mom whispered. "You think she suspects?" "She's just bitter," my dad replied. "She'll get over it." They still thought I didn't know. They still believed I was just grieving a lost opportunity, not realizing I had already pulled the rug out from under them. That was the beauty of it. I let them believe I was helpless, that I was stuck, waiting for crumbs. Meanwhile, every move I made was deliberate. Every smile, every thank you, every nod, it was all part of the plan. And just when they thought things were finally calming down, Aaron posted something, a big announcement on social media. Apparently, some investor had shown interest in his app. He was calling it the future of pet nutrition, posting videos of fancy office chairs and coffee machines. My mom was in the comments again, hyping him up like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. And that's when I hit send. The folder of screenshots, every post, every comment, every single digital receipt of how my future had been stolen and paraded online. I sent it all to Grandpa, no explanation. Just a subject line that said, "You should know." He called me the next day, and his voice was cold. Not angry, something worse. Controlled, calculated, like he was already moving pieces behind the scenes. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I just listened, and when we hung up, I sat there in silence, knowing that I had started something. They couldn't stop, but I wasn't done yet. I still had to get ready for Movin' Day. Northwestern wasn't going to wait for my family to sort out their mess. I had scholarships coming in. A few grants had finally gone through, and the account Grandpa had set up for me, that was enough to cover the rest. It was happening. I was going on my terms, and they had no idea. they still thought I was figuring things out, that I might stay home for a semester, that I was grateful for their support. I let them live in that illusion a little longer, because the real confrontation was still coming, and when it did, they would finally realize. They didn't just steal my college fund, they lost me. The week before Movin' Day, everything changed. For months, I'd been quiet, strategic, careful not to show what I knew or what I'd done. I let them believe I was just another teenager, overwhelmed by adulthood. They saw my silence as weakness, but they had no idea what was really going on behind the scenes. The truth was, I had already taken back control. The account my grandfather had built for me was secure, moved, locked, protected, but I wasn't just satisfied with saving what was mine. I wanted to make sure they couldn't touch anything else. Not one more cent with my name on it. Not one more illusion of power. So I did something they never saw coming. I froze them out completely. It started with the shared account, one that had technically been created for my future, but had somehow turned into their private piggy bank. Aaron's startup, the ridiculous dog food app he had zero qualifications to run, had been funded directly from it. And since I had recently turned 18, I had the legal right to take over. So I requested a full audit, quietly, without a word to them, and once the paperwork cleared, I submitted the request to freeze all outgoing access from the account. It only took a few days before the panic started. My dad came home in a fury, waving documents and muttering under his breath. I heard him arguing with my mom in the kitchen something about restricted access, account security blocks, and fraud warnings. I stayed upstairs pretending to be asleep, but inside I felt calm, more in control than I ever had, and then Aaron made it worse. He posted another big update online, champagne celebration. He was calling it the turning point in his company's journey. A new investor had shown interest. He was thanking the people who believed in me from day one, and my parents were in the comments again, full of praise, acting like they were the proud architects of his so-called success. It was disgusting. Stolen my future and handed it to him on a silver platter. And now they were pretending it was destiny. I didn't comment. I didn't reach out. But I made sure to screenshot every post, every brag, every smug little caption about self-made legacy. It was all evidence. Evidence of how far they'd gone to protect his dreams at the cost of mine. And finally, I sent it. I emailed everything to Grandpa, no context. Just thought you should see this. I think part of me still hoped you wouldn't believe it. That maybe, just maybe, I had misunderstood how deep the betrayal went. But that hope disappeared the moment he called me the next morning. His voice wasn't angry. It was precise, focused. I could tell he was already putting a plan in motion. He thanked me for the information and told me he was going to handle it. That was all he said. But it was enough, because I knew my grandfather. He didn't let things slide, especially not when it came to money. And definitely not when it came to loyalty. What happened after that, I didn't hear the details. But I felt the shift. My dad stopped speaking to me altogether. My mom was suddenly walking on eggshells, acting overly sweet one moment and completely cold the next. And Aaron, he went quiet. His posts stopped. His startup updates vanished. The champagne and office tours, gone. I didn't know what Grandpa had done, but it was clear the walls were closing in. And honestly, I felt nothing but peace. Let them feel the consequences. Let them sit in the discomfort they created. I still hadn't told them I was leaving for college. They assumed I'd stay close, that I'd live at home, maybe take classes online, piece my education together slowly while they figured things out. They thought I had no choice. They thought wrong. I had everything lined up. My tuition was covered by scholarships and grants. My housing was secured. My supplies were bought and packed, funded entirely by savings they didn't even know I had. And that investment account from Grandpa, it stayed untouched, still growing, still mine just in case. Then, the day came, move-in day. They tried to come with me. My mom showed up at my door dressed like she was going to a brunch, acting like nothing had happened. My dad stood beside her, rehearsing a speech about how proud they were of me. I didn't let them finish. You don't get to come, I said. They both froze. You don't get to help me unpack, or decorate, or meet my roommate. You gave away my future like it was spare change. You lied to my face and laughed about it. My mom's eyes filled with tears, the kind she probably thought would earn sympathy. My dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to Aaron, who was awkwardly lingering behind them. He looked guilty, but not enough. I hope your little dog food app crashes and burns, I told him. But hey, at least you got a good head start, right? Then I turned around and got in the car with my best friend, who had driven an hour, just to help me move. We didn't say anything for a while, just drove, and I never looked back. Once I got to campus, something shifted inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to save me. I wasn't trying to please anyone. I wasn't fighting for approval I would never get. I was just free. I cut off contact, blocked them all, deleted family group chats, let silence fill the space where their voices used to be. It was cleaner. That way, quieter, and somehow more honest than anything they had ever given me. Because the truth was, I wasn't the fragile little girl they thought they could manipulate. I was the daughter they underestimated. The one they thought would just accept the betrayal, stay quiet, stay loyal. But I didn't. I froze them out. I shut the door, and I finally walked into a future that belonged to me. It had been a little over 3 months since I moved out. By then, the silence from my family had become normal. No more fake smiles, no awkward phone calls, no forced conversations. Just distance. And honestly, that distance felt like a gift. College had been everything I'd hoped it would be. Busy, overwhelming at times, but full of possibility. I threw myself into my classes, made new friends, joined a writing club, and started to finally breathe again. The weight I'd been carrying for years of trying to be the good daughter, the easy child, was finally off my shoulders. But just when I started to feel settled, the storm hit. It was early October when my phone rang. The caller, ID, said Grandpa. The second I answered, I could tell something was wrong. His voice wasn't angry, it was cold, sharper than usual. He told me he'd just come back from a meeting with his lawyer. My parents had filed a claim, something about hardship, financial distress, and being wrongfully cut off from assets they believed they were entitled to. At first, I didn't even know how to respond. They had the audacity to claim they were the victims after everything. After stealing my education, giving it to Aaron, lying to my face, and laughing about it behind my back, they were now claiming that I had somehow wronged them. But Grandpa wasn't calling for sympathy. He was calling with a plan. What they didn't know was that he had already been preparing for this. Ever since I sent him the folder of screenshots, the social media posts, the digital paper trail of their lies, he'd been quietly moving things around, revising his estate, freezing every shared family account they still had access to. And now, with this new lawsuit hanging in the air, he was pushing forward with something else. A formal investigation. He wanted answers, real ones. Not the kind my parents gave when they were cornered. And since the original college fund had been co-managed but not fully owned by them, there were legal protections still in place, enough to launch a fraud inquiry. When Grandpa said the word, fraud, I went silent. I had imagined consequences, sure. I had pictured awkward apologies, family drama, maybe even financial stress, but fraud, that was serious. That was criminal. That was bigger than I ever expected. He explained that investigators had already started digging, and what they were finding wasn't good. There were emails between my parents and Aaron, messages showing that they'd knowingly used money, meant for my education, to fund a startup and LLC that had no client base, no contract history, and no legal justification for receiving those funds. It didn't matter that it was all in the family. The money was earmarked for one thing only, my future, and they had gambled it away. I sat there in my dorm, clutching my phone, listening to the fallout unfold in real time. Aaron's app, his big idea, was already tanking. The investor who had once shown interest, backed out the moment the legal heat turned up. The business account had been flagged and locked. His lease on the office space was terminated, and the rest of the team, gone to dot. Everything he had built on the back of my stolen future was crumbling. My dad's job was at risk now too, because when you're tied to financial misconduct, even if it's just family business, it sets off red flags, especially when you work in finance. My mom had tried to pivot. She started a blog, of all things, a parenting blog. When I couldn't make this up, she made a few posts, probably trying to salvage her public image, but the comments section tore her apart. She deleted the entire site within a week. And Aaron, well, he moved back home. No more glass offices and catered lunches. Just him, sitting in his childhood bedroom, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. That was almost poetic, but the fallout didn't stop there. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and it was my mom. She didn't open with, "I'm sorry." Of course not. She started with, "Natalie, we need to talk." Then she launched into this carefully rehearsed speech about misunderstandings and how Grandpa was blowing things out of proportion, how the family was being torn apart over a few decisions that had been made in desperation. I let her talk for a bit, just long enough to hear the panic start to creep into her voice. Then I hung up. She called again. I didn't answer. Then came the texts, long ones, emotional ones. She said they were about to lose the house, that my dad might face charges, that Aaron was devastated. She begged me not to let things go further. "Don't let this tear our family apart," she wrote. That one made me laugh. Tear our family apart. That happened the day they sat in the backyard and joked about draining my college fund. That happened when they watched me cry at the kitchen table and said nothing. That happened the moment they decided my future was less valuable than Aaron's. Fantasy. I didn't want them homeless. I didn't want anyone arrested. But I also wasn't going to be their lifeline. So I wrote back one sentence. "You broke it, you live with it." And then, silence. It was the kind of silence I didn't know I needed, the kind that made everything feel real, finished, clean. A few days later, Aaron sent me an email. It was long, rambling, full of excuses. He said he didn't know the money was stolen, that he thought it was part of a family investment, that he was misled. He said he never wanted to hurt me, that if there was anything I could do, anything at all, to help him talk to Grandpa, to stop the investigation, to fix things, he'd appreciate it. He even ended with, "I'll pay you back someday, I promise." I didn't reply, but I did forward the message to Grandpa because I wanted him to see exactly what desperation looked like by the end of that week. I had stopped waiting for apologies. I had stopped wondering if things could ever go back to normal. I had finally accepted that the people who raised me weren't who I thought they were, and I wasn't going to keep pretending otherwise. Instead, I focused on myself. I dove deeper into my studies. Took on a part-time internship with a publishing house. Started writing again, something I hadn't done since the whole mess began. It felt like I was slowly healing, not with big moments, but with little victories, one day at a time, one choice after another. And the best part? For the first time in my life, I was building something that was truly mine. No lies, no secrets, no stolen futures, just me, standing on my own. Thanksgiving break came around faster than I expected. It was the first time in months that I didn't have classes or work pulling me in every direction. Just me, some quiet, and a chance to breathe. I didn't go home. That place, it wasn't home anymore, not since the day they chose Aaron over me. Not since they watched me crumble and said nothing. And definitely not since they tried to spin it all like I was the one tearing the family apart. So instead, I went to the only place that still felt honest, Grandpa's. His house was exactly how I remembered it. Warm, a little dusty, with that familiar smell of cinnamon tea and old books. The same chessboard sat on the corner table, and his reading glasses were exactly where he always left them. He opened the door without a word, and for a while, we didn't say much. We just sat. The silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt earned, comfortable, like we both knew what we'd been through, and we didn't need to rehash every detail to understand it. Eventually, he handed me a folder. Inside were a stack of documents, legal papers, trust fund records, finalized estate plans. And then, on top of everything else, a letter. It was handwritten, just a single page. At the bottom, in his strong, steady script, it said, "You always had the strength. They just couldn't see it, but I did." I sat there holding that letter, my hands shaking, and I cried. Not because of the money, not because of the documents or the estate, but because someone saw me. Someone finally saw that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't something to be used, or set aside, or ignored, that I mattered. That moment, it changed everything. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving my parents wrong, or punishing Aaron. It was about reclaiming the version of myself I almost forgot existed, the version that believed in her own worth. After I got back to campus, I started to see things more clearly. The chaos my parents created was still unfolding. From what I'd heard through the grapevine, the fraud investigation had triggered even more issues. Turns out, when you misuse funds from a minor's educational account, the IRS starts to ask questions. Big questions. My dad was now under serious review at work. His employer couldn't ignore the flags being raised. And when your job involves handling other people's money, even the suggestion of misconduct can be enough to unravel everything. My mom, once the queen of curated family photos and inspirational parenting quotes, had gone completely silent online. After she tried and failed to run that blog, she gave up. She stopped posting altogether. I guess it's hard to play the role of the perfect mother when the truth is out. Aaron, he was still living at home, no company, no office, just a bedroom full of debt, a frozen business account, and a very expensive lesson he couldn't return. I didn't talk to them. I didn't reach out. I didn't even think about them most days, because I was busy doing something they never expected. Was thriving. I landed a part-time internship at a publishing house near campus. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay wasn't great, but I loved it. I was reading, editing, learning how stories were brought into the world. I was writing again too. Short pieces at first, then longer ones. Personal essays, stories that reflected what I'd been through, not as a victim, but as someone who made it out the other side. My days were full. My nights were quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of the life I was building, because it was mine, completely mine. Not something handed to me, or stolen from someone else. Not something built on lies or manipulation. Every step I took, I earned. Every achievement, every small victory, it all came from me. And you know what? That was enough. That was more than enough. There were moments, of course, where the past tried to creep back in. A random message from an old neighbor, a photo someone shared online, even just walking by a family on campus, laughing together, made something ache deep inside me. But I didn't let that ache control me anymore. I had spent so much of my life trying to hold our family together, trying to be the glue, the peacekeeper, the good daughter, the one who never asked for too much. And in the end, all that got me was betrayal. So I stopped trying to fix what was never mine to fix. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped needing people who only saw me when it was convenient for them. And I started seeing myself not as broken, not as some girl who got her future ripped away, but as someone who had the courage to walk away, to stand her ground, to rebuild, brick by brick, even when no one was cheering her on. That's the thing about power. It's not always loud, it's not always flashy. Sometimes, power looks like silence, like choosing peace over performance, like saying no to people who've hurt you, like starting over, quietly, and letting your life speak for itself. They took my future. But they didn't take me, and when I finally stood on my own, I realized I was never as alone as I thought, because I had myself, my strength, my voice, my truth, and that was something they could never steal.